for staying with us here on the Urban Debate. We move on to the fourth big conversation point. The big story that we are putting in spotlight right now is the row over madrassas and whether or not they should be funded by the government. Now, why are we talking about it? Because the state government in Assam brought in a bill to say, well, we're going to convert all of them into general education institutions. Otherwise, no funding, no government funding. And this has now become a huge political fight as well in Assam between the BJP government and the opposition, especially the AIUDF that's going after the BJP over this law. Yesterday, this bill was tabled in the assembly to abolish all state-run madrassas and convert them into general schools with effect from April 2021. So this bill is actually called the Assam Repealing Bill 2020. And why is it called that? Because essentially, as it seeks to convert these madrassas into general schools, it proposes to abolish two existing laws. So the idea is to abolish two existing laws that exist for madrassas and the benefits and the support that these laws bring in really from the state. But the government says that it's not going to bring about any change in the status, pay or the service conditions as far as the staff is concerned, whether it's teaching staff or non-teaching staff. Remember, this bill has come in just a few days after the cabinet gave a nod in Assam to close down madrassas and Sanskrit schools which are existing in this state. But the conversation that I want to have tonight is not just about one state. It's about the principle. The principle about whether specific religious education institutions, irrespective of which religion they are, should they be funded by the government? And if they are, what kind of education are they going to be imparting then? Take a look at what really is happening, in many parts of our country. 18 states in India currently have madrassas that are funded even by the center. There are a few such schemes as well. Now, under our constitution, Article 30 gives minorities the right to have their own educational institutions. Minorities can then seek grants from various governments and they can get that funding and the support from the government without any discrimination. The center does extend help to improve the education standard. When it was brought in, the idea was to say, okay, these institutions exist, let's give them the funds that are required to improve the education standards in these institutions. Just 4 states between them have about 10,000 madrassas with over 20 lakh students in our country. Uttar Pradesh actually being the one with the highest number of madrassas and a higher proportion of students, obviously. This is the data that I'm quoting to you from the Education Ministry itself, put out by them in 2018. Should other states look at it? Should we have educational institutions, religious educational institutions, that are backed by the government then? Let's say good evening to Charu Pragya, spokesperson for the BJP, Lieutenant General Zamiruddin Shah, former Deputy Chief of Army Staff and ex-VC for AMU, Dr. Tasleem Ahmad Rahmani, National Secretary for STPI, joining us this evening. Also, the President for the Muslim Political Council. And let me first also say good evening to Rahul Ishwar, social activist, who's joining us. But first up, I do want to go across to Lieutenant General Shah. General Shah, your own view, there may have been a time where these madrasas served a purpose and there was the intent was to support them to improve the quality of education. But is that a concept we should continue to look for and implement even today?
Let me tell you that the madrasas are a huge educational network. What has happened is, because of poverty, a large number of Muslim families cannot send their children to school. So the next alternative is at least make them literate in a madrasa. Let me also tell you that I started my education in a madrasa. When I was 5 years old, I went to the family madrasa. And then I switched over to a modern school. And then I joined the army and then progressed. So what I would say is that the madrasas have been unfairly demonized for no fault of theirs. It is because of poverty that Muslim parents are sending their children to madrassas. There is a crying need for the modernization. All over the world, madrasa really means a school. It means a school. That means it is not only for religious teaching, but for all-round education. I've been for a very, very long time stressing that we need to modernize the madrasas, make them to prepare their students to earn bread and butter. After all, what is a madrasa doing in India? This is the result of what happened in 1857. After 1857, the British demonized anything to do with Islam. They felt that the war of independence was triggered by Muslims. So when you are a community which is being victimized, what do? You tend to draw into a shell. And that is exactly what happened. The madrasas gave up the normal education which they were imparting and started only religious teaching. This is very, very unfortunate. We need to modernize the madrasas, give the children a chance to earn their bread and butter. When I was the Vice Chancellor of Aligarh Muslim University, I realized this problem. And we started a course called a bridge course. That means transition from madrasa education to a modern secular education. We are at the moment at Aligarh Muslim University training 100 students per year. These are madrasa students, and let me tell you that these are very bright boys and girls. And after they've had a 1-year course, a bridge course, that means they learn English, they learn social sciences, and they learn information technology.
Right.
These students are capable and have entered universities through open competitive examinations. So they have a lot of potential, but what needs to be done is to show them the way out. It is not only religious teaching. Yes, religious teaching is important in the madrasa, but the sole aim is not to make an imam and a muezzin. No.
Okay.
We need well-trained people.
So, General Shah, let me pick up that point that you've made. And like you rightly said, you know, if taught properly, if dealt with and guided properly, then like you, we can have students coming out of madrasas who become, lieutenant generals in the Indian Army, and then go on to become such a stalwart in terms of, teaching and running a university like the Aligarh Muslim University. So then, Charu Pragya, should we not look at, say, reforming these madrasas, fixing the problems that they have, rather than saying we withdraw the funding?
I'm also foolish and silly, but you are.
With all due respect, I hope this is so very to me. Let me remind him that he is the exception. He is not the rule to the students who come out of madrasas. And when we remember that, we will be able to analyze all the other facts that I'm going to put on record on your show today in a more neutral manner. What truly is secularism? It's equality of all religions. And how can India be truly secular if there is a state-funded organization which is only teaching the Quran and no other book? Why is it that the state cannot fund an organization to teach the Gita or the Bible or any other religious text? Why only a Quran? Also, sir mentions the reason for madrasas. 1857. Sir, India has come a long way since 1857. India is in a new era of modernization. We should be looking at making sure our education policy is equal. We should be making sure that all the students in our country are imparted education at a level which is very easy to measure when it comes to giving them employment. You know how many graduates are Muslims today in our country? Only 14%. A large reason for this is madrasa education. Also, you are saying that there needs to be a gap course, there needs to be education to bridge the gap between madrasa's education, mainstream education. Why not make all education in our country mainstream education? See, nobody is stopping private institutions to teach the Quran. Nobody has stopped that. But why is it that government-funded institutions should be teaching one religion and not the other?
So will the
Let
center be
there
also
be
stopping these
pluralism
funds?
in our
Do you think the
education,
center should
not
also stop
exclude.
these funds, not just Assam? Do you think the center should also stop all of these funds, the schemes
See,
that
if you
they
want my
have to
personal
support?
opinion on it, Tanvi, today we are only Assam. See, today we are only discussing Assam, but if you want my personal opinion on it, I think that's how it should be. As a citizen of New India, as a youth of New India, I don't think that one religion needs to be put above the other to get education. Why can't everybody not go to the same kind of school?
Okay,
Why can
Taslim
everybody
Rahmani
not go to the same
respond
kind
to
of
that.
colleges?
Taslim
Why can
Rahmani
they
respond to
not
that.
all
In a secular country, why should there be rules which exist as per our own laws and constitution? Why should there be a system where you give a special support to education of a religious institution of one minority and not the other religions?
Tanvi, this is a very important and a big issue, and this cannot be summed up in such a small debate of half an hour or 1 hour. There are many aspects that we have to discuss about it. Number one is the very obvious is the constitutional question. Like we have the constitutional guarantees, like the Article 25 with the fundamental right of the minority education and the right to preach, propagate and practice both. And when we talk about propagating, that covers the teaching of the religious education. And the Article 29 and 30, both the minority education also have the provision of funding the minority education. That's why we have hundreds of minority aided educational institutions which also impart education in Urdu language and the Bengali language and then so many other minority languages. So those are the constitutional aspect. Now what the Hemant Biswas Sharma has said that out of the survey report he quoted that most of the madrasa going students want to become doctors, lawyers and some other professions. So if they want to become the professional, why they don't directly go to the school rather going to the madrasa? Now madrasa in India, in madrasa in India has three institutional form. One is madrasa, another is maktab, which is equivalent to their primary school, and then the formal school. Since up to 1995, and all the madrasas were self-funded by the community. And let me tell you, around 2,500 crores of rupees community was spending on those madrasas. 1995 onward, under this Article 29 and 30, the funding and madrasa board, etc. has come up, and some madrasa funding has started. Community still in Assam, there are around 600 madrasas by the private operators. They will continue, as he said. When you say that why the Quran shall be taught in the government funded, this is not a constitutional question. And the UDF there in Assam has very rightly said that this is not more than a political gimmick, which is serving two parts in one. Number one, up to the election extent, it will serve the communal agenda of the Bharatiya Janata Party when they say that why the government shall fund for the teaching of Quran. It will serve them, and by the time the elections come, somebody will go to the court, and because this is the unconstitutional law, it may go null and void inside the court, but by then the election will be over. So that way the political.
I also want to point out, Dr. Rahmani, the point that while the cabinet had taken decision about shutting down government-funded madrasas and Sanskrit schools, the bill that has been brought in the assembly is only about the two madrasa-related laws and not the others. So I don't know what's happening on the other front. So
even if Tanvi, I'm advocating the education, the religious education, even if it is the Bible, it is Gita, it is Guru Granth Sahib, why not?
Why not?
Has a right, and the government is the custodian of each and every citizen. And our law, and if you talk about the new India, then the new India will not be a secular India, it will be a communal India.
Okay, then. Rahul Ishwar has heard all sides very patiently. Rahul, go ahead, make your points.
Tanvi, 2 points. One, obviously, this is a very...
One minute, please. Rahul Ishwar, let him make his points, opening remarks, Charu. I'll come back to you and then go to General Shah for a response. Yeah.
Tanviji, obviously, this is a very nuanced topic which has many layers.
Yeah.
See, everyone is for a spiritual education for every community. At the same point of time, in our past, we used to, especially after partition, we used to be very inclusive and we wanted to include every community. Confidence building were all there. One of our greatest ministers, first education minister, was a Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who was a great Holy Quran Pandit or Holy Quran scholar. But years have passed. Why not each community take their own responsibility to set up spiritual education? Is that not a fair question to ask? Let Hindu community take the responsibility to teach Gita or Ramayana. Let Muslim community take the responsibility to teach Holy Quran. Let Christian community take the responsibility to Holy Bible or Guru Granth Sahib by 6. Let the community take the onus and responsibility. It would be wise for the state to fund all those aspects through which more engineers, doctors, more mathematicians, more media persons, journalists can come. So the religious spiritual aspect is best left to those particular communities where they can involve more freely in whichever activities they want to. So is it not fair when we say let each community set up their own spiritual religious institution rather than using government funds? See, the core issue here is using a government fund. So why not these communities set up their own institutions and leave the government fund for what we call a general, pluralistic or inclusive national education through which we can make scientific advancement, and let the spirituality be left to community leaders. I belong to a community. Let my community build my own spiritual schools rather than taking funds from the government.
Okay.
Is that not a fair thing?
Okay, General Shah, would you like to respond to that?
I'd like to say that yes, things are vastly different than what it was in 1857. I just gave a background of why madrassas reverted only to religious teaching. That was the reason. I strongly feel that religious teaching, I quite agree, should be funded by the community. Let me tell you, a large number of madrasas have refused government support because once that comes, there's a lot of interference in the teaching in the madrasas. I say that let the community do their own religious teaching, and I again stress that madrasas solely for religious education is an outdated problem. It is outdated. What needs to be done? We've got to follow what the seminaries in Europe are doing. I mean, they're training priests, but besides training priests, those priests also do their PhDs. So that is the pattern which needs to be followed. We need to combine the religious and the temporal. That means both have to be combined. Religious teaching by itself is only creating problems. I think it has to be broad-based, and madrasas need to be modernized. I think the Muslim community should take on this problem. I mean, there are vast tracts of land which are available, work funds, all these can be used, because whenever there is government funding, there is government interference. And that is something which we need to be avoided.
Okay. That's a very interesting point that has now been brought up here by our panelists. Let me bring in Dr. Rahmani to you first. Do you agree that let it be the community that takes the responsibility and then have a combination of modern education and religious education?
Tanvi, I partly agree with General Zabiruddin Shah Sahab. First of all, I want to answer Rahul Ishwar. You see, we all are the taxpayers, and the tax are being always paid for the development of the society or the citizenry. And whatever aspect we need to develop, it is for all. It includes education and every kind of education. So we cannot say that the community shall be responsible also for their own religious education. No, the government shall also be responsible, because we all are paying tax. There can be some controversy, some difference of opinion. We can discuss and debate further. As far as General Sahab has said, the old education system, Islamic teaching has its own educational system always. It starts from the religious education and it extends to the modern education up to the higher and super specialization level. Say, for example, Avicenna, He was basically a madrasa or a religious preacher, and then become the father of the modern medicine. And like the Al-Kindi, like the Razors, there are so many names we can say which have basically the religious preacher, but became the laureates of their times, and still they have been taken. So this is a question which is debatable within the community, that what should be the form of the madrasa education system or the Muslim educational system. So this is still a debatable. I also have differences.
So
with the
without
madrasa
that
education system.
debate, is it fair, Charu Pragya, to come in, bring in a law and just put it into the assembly and say, no, this is what it is, we are shutting it down?
So Tanvi, because somebody was quoting the Constitution to me, let me quote it right back. Let me start with the very basic article in our Constitution, Article 14. Article 14 talks about equality. But here we are running an education institution where there is no equality. Only Muslim students are given admission. Here we are running an institution where only Islam is taught. No other religion is taught. How can we force students to go to some place, pass education in only Islamic subjects, and then we make them mainstream, we do double the work? So when you are quoting other articles,
well, how are you forcing
Article
students
14,
to go anywhere?
also the safeguards that were needed, 70. I'm not, so Tanvi, get to the crux of the point that I'm trying to make. When you talk about equality, can we not have an education institution which is equal for all? So where is equality here? And I'm very happy to see all the panelists are now actually quite in agreement that religious institutions should be funded by the religions themselves, not by the state. So that is at least a step in the right direction.
But it has to be...
Tanvi, please remember this. When the government is stepping out, government will lose the leverage. Every community should be guarded against the half-blind elements of their own communities getting upper hand, whether it be Hindu, Muslim or Christian. So always remember, when it is said that there are consequences, and let the communities moderate, come forward, let them raise resources and definitely help these institutions. Let Abdul Kalam emerge from these institutions. We have one of our greatest president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who is the son of an imam from a poor South Indian Muslim community. Let us have more Dr. Abdul Kalams or Soldier Abdul Hamids or Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, and make Muslim community integrate themselves like every other community, Hindu or Christian, to the Indian mainstream, and may many legends emerge from these communities, a genuine wish we can hope for.
Okay, well, I'm completely out of time. I wish we had more time, but maybe another round of conversation with all of you. Like our panelists also say, there are lots of nuances to it, and the conversation that needs to happen is whether we move forward by reforming the madrasas, the lakhs of them that have so many students across our country, or we look at completely nullifying the role of the government and say it's up to the communities to fund them and run them. Then what happens about what is being taught there, and whether the right appropriate education is being given to our students? Yes, the state should not discriminate on the basis of religion. When the rules were set up and the schemes were set up, it was because this network existed, and it was a good network where if you provide the funds, you can ensure that a good set of quality education is given to the students. But beyond a point, the rules need to be the same for everybody. Does it mean that you shut them down, or you convert them into general schools, or you remove the religious education part of it and let the system continue as is, or bring in other reforms? Those are the things that the government, perhaps at a central level, will have to start looking at. Of course, what's happening in Assam is also a lot to do with the fact that that state is going to election next year. So there will be a lot of politics being played in the name of religion, in the name of caste, and that will just intensify from here on. I'm simply glad that we didn't have panelists sitting here tonight trying to paint it into a Hindu versus Muslim, demonizing one community and the madrasas, but actually gotten into the real issues and the nuances that come along with this very wide network of educational institutes that exist in our country and do deserve a lot of reform. Thank you so much for joining us.